Squirrels, I'm so sorry. I'm back finally. This is Mrs. Vandermeyer. She lifted her eyebrows at the sight of the girls. Chapter 12, Part 2. You? I had a touch of toothache, ma'am, said Tuppence glibly, so thought it better to come home and have a quiet evening. Mrs. Vandermeyer said nothing, but she drew back and let Tuppence pass into the hall. How unfortunate for you, she said coldly. You'd better go to bed. Oh, I shall be all right in the kitchen, ma'am. Cook is out, said Mrs. Vandermeyer in a rather disagreeable tone. I sent her out. So you see, you had better go to bed. Suddenly Tuppence felt afraid. There was a ring in Mrs. Vandermeyer's voice that she did not like at all. Also, the other woman was slowly edging her up the passage. Tuppence turned at bay. I don't want. Then a flash, a rim of cold steel touched her temple, and Mrs. Vandermeyer's voice rose cold and menacing. A rim of cold steel touched her temple. A gun? You damned little fool. Do you think I don't know? No, don't answer. If you struggle or cry out, I'll shoot you like a dog. The rim of steel pressed a little harder against her temple. Now then, march, went on Mrs. Vandermeyer. This way, into my room. In a minute, when I've done with you, you'll go to bed as I told you to, and you'll sleep. Oh, yes, my little spy, you'll sleep all right. There was a sort of hideous geniality in the last words which Tuppence did not at all like. For the moment there was nothing to be done, and she walked obediently into Mrs. Vandermeyer's bedroom. The pistol never left her forehead. The room was in a state of wild disorder. Clothes were flung about right and left. A suitcase and a hat box, half packed, stood in the middle of the floor. Tuppence pulled herself together with an effort. Her voice shook a little, but she spoke out bravely. Come now, she said, this is nonsense. You can't shoot me. Why, everyone in the building would hear the report. I'd risk that, said Mrs. Vandermeyer cheerfully, but as long as you don't sing out for help, you're all right. And I don't think you will. You're a clever girl. You deceived me all right. I hadn't a suspicion of you. So I've no doubt that you understand perfectly well that this is where I'm on top and you're underneath. Now then, sit on the bed, put your hands above your head, and if you value your life, don't move them. Tuppence obeyed passively. Her good sense told her there was nothing else to do but accept the situation. If she shrieked for help, there was very little chance of anyone hearing her, whereas there was probably quite a good chance of Mrs. Vandermeyer shooting her. In the meantime, every minute of delay gained was valuable. Mrs. Vandermeyer laid down the revolver on the edge of the washstand within reach of her hand, and still eyeing Tuppence like a lynx in case the girl should attempt to move, she took a little stoppered bottle from its place on the marble and poured some of its contents into a glass, which she filled up with water. What's that? Asked Tuppence sharply. Something to make you sleep soundly. Tuppence paled a little. Are you going to poison me? She asked in a whisper. Perhaps, said Mrs. Vandermeyer, smiling agreeably. Then I shan't drink it, said Tuppence firmly. I'd much rather be shot. At any rate, that would make a row and someone might hear it, but I won't be killed off quietly like a lamb. Mrs. Vandermeyer stamped her foot. Don't be a little fool. Do you really think I want to hue and cry for murder out after me? If you've any sense at all, you'll realize that poisoning you wouldn't suit my book at all. It's a sleeping draught, that's all. You'll wake up tomorrow morning none the worse. I simply don't want the bother of tying you up and gagging you. That's the alternative, and you won't like it, I can tell you. It can be very rough if I choose, so drink this down like a good girl, and you'll be none the worse for it. In her heart of hearts, Tuppence believed her. The argument she had adduced rang rang true. It was a simple and effective method of getting her out of the way for the time being. Nonetheless, the girl did not take kindly to the idea of being tamely put to sleep without as much as one bid for freedom. She felt that once Mrs. Vandermeyer gave them the slip, the last hope of finding Tommy would be gone. Tuppence was quick in her mental processes. All these reflections passed through her mind in a flash, and she saw where a chance, a very problematical chance, lay, and she determined to risk all in one supreme effort. Accordingly, she lurched suddenly off the bed and fell on her knees before Mrs. Vandermeyer, clutching her skirts frantically. "I don't believe it," she moaned. "It's poison. I know it's poison. Don't make me drink it." Her voice rose to a shriek. "Don't make me drink it." Mrs. Vandermeyer, glass in hand, looked down with a curling lip at the sudden collapse. "Get up, you little idiot. Don't go on driveling there. How you ever had the nerve to play your part as you did, I can't think." She stamped her foot. "Get up, I say." But Tuppence continued to cling and sob, interjecting her sobs with incoherent appeals for mercy. Every minute gained was to the good. Moreover, as she groveled, she moved imperceptibly nearer to her objective. She's trying to get that gun, I think. Mrs. Vandermeyer gave her a sharp, impatient exclamation and jerked the girl to her knees. "Drink it at once!" Imperilously, she pressed the glass to the girl's lips. Tuppence gave one last despairing moan. "You swear it won't hurt me?" she temporized. "Of course it won't hurt you. Don't be a fool. Will you swear it?" Yes, said the other impatiently. "I swear it." Tuppence raised a trembling left hand to the glass. "Very well." Her mouth opened meekly. Mrs. Vandermeyer gave a sigh of relief, off her guard at the moment. Then, quick as a flash, Tuppence jerked the glass upward as hard as she could. The fluid in it splashed into Mrs. Vandermeyer's face, and during her momentary gasp, Tuppence's right hand shot out and grasped the revolver where it lay on the edge of the washstand. The next moment she had sprung back a pace, and the revolver pointed straight at Mrs. Vandermeyer's heart. "You go, Tuppence!" With no unsteadiness in the hand that held it. In the moment of victory, Tuppence betrayed a somewhat unsportsmanlike triumph. "Now who's on top and who's underneath?" she crowed. The other's face was convulsed with rage. For a minute Tuppence thought she was going to spring upon her, which would have placed the girl in an unpleasant dilemma, since she meant to draw the line at actually letting off the revolver. However, with an effort, Mrs. Vandermeyer controlled herself, and at last a slow, evil smile crept over her face. "Not a fool then, after all. You did that well, girl, but you shall pay for it. Oh, yes, you shall pay for it. I have a long memory." "I'm surprised you should have been gulled so easily," said Tuppence scornfully. "Did you really think I was the kind of girl to roll about on the floor and whine for mercy?" "You may do some day," said the other significantly. The cold malignity of her manner sent an unpleasant chill down Tuppence's spine, but she was not going to give in to it. "Supposing we sit down," she said pleasantly. "Our present attitude is a little melodramatic. No, not on the bed. Draw a chair up to the table. That's right. Now I'll sit opposite you with the revolver in front of me, just in case of accident. Splendid. Now let's talk." "What about?" said Mrs. Vandermeyer sullenly. Tuppence eyed her thoughtfully for a minute. She was remembering several of Boris's words. "I believe you would sell us." And her answer, "The price would have to be enormous." Given lightly, it was true, yet might not there be a substratum of truth in it? Long ago, had not Whittington asked, "Who's been blabbing? Rita?" Would Rita Vandermeyer prove to be the weak spot in the armor of Mr. Brown? Keeping her eyes fixed steadily on the other's face, Tuppence replied quietly, "Money." Money. Mrs. Vandemeyer started. Clearly the reply was unexpected. What do you mean? I'll tell you. You said just now that you had a long memory. A long memory isn't half as useful as a long purse. I dare say it relieves your feelings a good deal to plan out all sorts of dreadful things to do to me, but is that practical? Revenge is very unsatisfactory. Everyone always says so, but money... Tuppence warmed to her pet creed. Well, there's nothing unsatisfactory about money, is there? Do you think, said Mrs. Vandemeyer scornfully, that I'm the kind of woman to sell my friends? Yes, said Tuppence promptly, if the price was big enough. A paltry £100 or so? No, said Tuppence, I should suggest 100,000. Her economical spirit did not permit her to mention the whole $1,000,000 suggested by Julius. A flush crept over Mrs. Vandemeyer's face. What did you say? She asked, her fingers playing nervously with a brooch on her breast. In that moment, Tuppence knew that the fish was hooked, and for the first time, she felt a horror of her own money-loving spirit. It gave her a dreadful sense of kinship to the woman fronting her. 100,000 pounds, repeated Tuppence. The light died out of Mrs. Vandemeyer's eyes. She leaned back in her chair. Bah, she said, you haven't got it. No, admitted Tuppence, I haven't, but I know someone who has. Who? A friend of mine. Must be a millionaire, remarked Mrs. Vandemeyer unbelievingly. As a matter of fact, he is. He's an American. He'll pay you that without a murmur. You can take it from me that it's a perfectly genuine proposition. Itchy nose. Mrs. Vandemeyer sat up again. I'm inclined to believe you, she said slowly. There was a silence between them for some time. Then Mrs. Vandemeyer looked up. What does he want to know, this friend of yours? Tuppence went through a momentary struggle, but it was Julius's money and his interest must come first. He wants to know where Jane Finn is, she said boldly. Mrs. Vandermort showed no surprise. I'm not sure where she is at the present moment, she replied. But you could find out? Oh, yes, returned Mrs. Vandemeyer carelessly. There would be no difficulty about that. Then, Tuppence's voice shook a little. There's a boy, a friend of mine. I'm afraid something's happened to him. Through your pal. Doggone it. Through your pal Boris. What's his name? Sore throat. It's sinus mess. No joke. What's his name? Tommy Beersford. Never heard of him, but I'll ask Boris. He'll tell me anything he knows. Thank you. Tuppence felt a terrific rise in her spirit. It impelled her to more audacious efforts. There's one thing more. Well? Tuppence leaned forward and lowered her voice. Who is Mr. Brown? Her quick eyes saw the sudden paling of her beautiful face. With an effort, Mrs. Vandemeyer pulled herself together and tried to resume her former manner, but the attempt was a mere parody. She shrugged her shoulders. You can't have learned much about him if you don't know that nobody knows who Mr. Brown is. You do, said Tuppence quietly. Again the color deserted the other's face. "What makes you think that?" "I don't know," said the girl truthfully, "but I'm sure." Mrs. Vandemeyer stared in front of her for a long time. "Yes," she said hoarsely at last, "I know. I was beautiful, you see, very beautiful." "You are still," said Tuppence with admiration. Mrs. Vandemeyer shook her head. There was a strange gleam in her electric blue eyes. "Not beautiful enough," she said in a soft, dangerous voice. "Not beautiful enough. And sometimes lately I've been afraid it's dangerous to know too much." She leaned forward across the table. "Swear that my name shan't be brought into it, that no one shall ever know." "I swear it, and once he's caught, you'll be out of danger." A terrified look swept across Mrs. Vandemeyer's face. Shall I ever be?" She clutched Tuppence's arm. "You're sure about the money?" "Quite sure." "When shall I have it? There must be no delay." This friend of mine will be here presently. He may have to send cables or something like that, but there won't be any delay. He's a terrific hustler." A resolute look settled on Mrs. Vandemeyer's face. "I'll do it. It's a great sum of money, and besides," she gave a curious smile, "it's not wise to throw over a woman like me." For a moment or two she remained smiling and lightly tapping her fingers on the table. Suddenly she started and her face blanched. "What was that?" "I heard nothing." Mrs. Vandemeyer gazed round her fearfully. "If there should be someone listening—" "Nonsense! Who could there be?" "Even the walls might have ears," whispered the other. "I tell you, I'm frightened." "You don't know him." "Think of the £100,000, said Tuppence soothingly. Mrs. Vandemeyer passed her tongue over her dried lips. "You don't know him," she reiterated hoarsely. "He's... ah!" With a shriek of terror she sprang to her feet. Her outstretched hand pointed over Tuppence's head. Then she swayed to the ground in a dead faint. Tuppence looked round to see what had startled her. In the doorway were Sir James Peel Egerton and Julius Hersheimer. And that's it. It's all of chapter 12. And y'all, I was going to read an extra, but I am so sorry. This such a sore throat from this sinus drainage. I'm taking my Flonase. I'm taking Tylenol. I think I'm going to have to go to CVS tomorrow and find something else. Terrible. Tommy's going to be alright, I'm sure. Love y'all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. See you tomorrow at 3 on Sunday. Bye-bye.